The judge's words still echo in my mind. "Mrs. Holloway, you have 48 hours to surrender your children." I stood there in that courtroom, watching my husband's family celebrate as they took everything. My kids, my home, and what they thought was $30 million, but they never found the letter Roland wrote before he died, the one that would change everything 10 years later. My name is Vivian Holloway, and if you'd told me 15 years ago that I'd lose my children to the very people who were supposed to be their family, I would have said you were insane. I was just a florist then, 27 years old, running a small shop on Bay Street in Savannah, Georgia. My hands always smelled like roses and baby's breath, and my biggest worry was making rent during the slow months. I never imagined I'd be standing in a courtroom, labeled a gold digger and an unfit mother, watching strangers in expensive suits determine whether I could keep my own children. The morning everything fell apart started like any other. October 15th, 6:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the kitchen clock, timing Theo's eggs. He liked them runny, exactly 3 minutes in boiling water. Penelope was at the breakfast table, working on her spelling words. "Mom, how do you spell necessary?" she asked, her pencil poised over her homework. Roland was reaching for his coffee when his hand suddenly gripped the counter. His face went white, then gray. The coffee mug shattered on our kitchen floor, and I can still hear the sound it made, like our whole life breaking into pieces. "Call 911!" I screamed at Penelope while I caught Roland as he fell. His eyes were wide, confused, searching mine for answers I didn't have. Theo ran in from the living room, still in his dinosaur pajamas, asking why Daddy was on the floor. I held Roland's head in my lap, told him I loved him over and over while we waited for the ambulance. His last words weren't profound or poetic. He just squeezed my hand and said, "The greenhouse plans, bottom drawer, for you and the kids." Then he was gone. 35 years old, healthy as far as we knew, dead from a heart attack caused by a genetic condition none of us knew existed. The paramedics worked on him for 20 minutes. They used words like ventricular fibrillation and inherited arrhythmia, medical terms that meant nothing to me then, but would later be twisted in court to suggest I should have known, should have done something, should have forced him to get tested for a condition nobody knew he had. 3 days later, while my children were still asking when Daddy would come home from heaven, my mother-in-law Constance arrived at my door. She didn't come to comfort her grandchildren or support her daughter-in-law. She came with her younger son Sterling and a man in a $1,000 suit who introduced himself as their family attorney. "We need to discuss Roland's estate," Constance said, walking into my living room without invitation. She was 67 then, with perfectly styled silver hair and cold blue eyes that had never once looked at me with warmth. She sat in Roland's favorite chair, the leather one where he read stories to the kids every night, like she was claiming territory. Sterling stood behind her, all 45 years of him radiating the bitterness of a man who'd never lived up to his older brother. Where Roland built a successful business, Sterling had failed at 5 different ventures, each one funded and abandoned by their mother. $30 million in life insurance, he said, not bothering with condolences. That's quite a payout for a 4-year marriage. I was still in shock, still hadn't even picked out clothes for my husband's burial, and they were talking about money. Penelope was upstairs in her room, 8 years old and refusing to eat because Daddy wasn't there to cut her sandwiches into triangles the way she liked. Theo, only 6, had been sleeping in our bed because he was afraid Mommy might disappear too. And these people, Roland's blood family, sat in my living room calculating my worth like I was a line item on a balance sheet. "The children deserve to be raised as Holloways," Constance announced, as if it were already decided. "Properly educated, properly provided for, not scrambling in the dirt playing with flowers." That's when I knew this wasn't about grief or family or even money, really. This was about control, about a woman who'd lost her son and decided she'd take mine as compensation. But I didn't know then how far she would go, how low she would sink, or how much I would lose before the truth finally came out. I met Roland on a Thursday afternoon in April, 3.5 years before he died. He had ordered 3 dozen roses for his hardware store's grand opening, specifically requesting red ones mixed with white. When I arrived with the delivery, he was standing outside Holloway Hardware, directing contractors who were putting up the new sign. He looked nothing like the wealthy businessman he was, worn jeans, a flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and work boots covered in sawdust. "Are you the owner?" I asked, holding the massive arrangement. He turned around, smiled, and said, "I am, and I'm hoping the delivery girl comes with these flowers." "Only if you promise not to be this cheesy every day," I shot back, setting the arrangement on a sawhorse. He laughed, really laughed, not the polite chuckle rich men usually gave service workers. "I'm Roland Holloway, and you just made my grand opening about 10 times better." We were married 8 months later in a tiny ceremony at Forsyth Park. My mother walked me down the aisle crying happy tears because she thought I'd found my fairy tale. Roland's family sat on his side like they were at a funeral, Constance wearing black as if to make a point. Our life wasn't what people assumed when they heard the Holloway name. Yes, Roland had inherited his father's hardware business, but he'd earned its growth himself, expanding from 3 stores to 12 across Georgia through 70-hour work weeks and in genuine love for helping people fix their homes. He'd come home with paint under his fingernails and stories about helping customers figure out plumbing problems. I kept my flower shop running because I loved it, not because we needed the money. It was my sanctuary, my creative outlet, my connection to the person I'd been before becoming a Holloway. Our home was a modest 4-bedroom colonial on the outskirts of Savannah, not the mansion people imagined. The backyard was our paradise, though. Roland had built raised garden beds where we grew vegetables with the kids. Penelope would help me arrange bouquets after school, her little fingers learning to strip thorns from roses while she told me about her day. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm artistic like you, Mommy," she'd beam, tucking baby's breath behind her ear. Theo would play with his toy trucks in the corner of the shop, making engine noises and building roads through piles of ribbon. Sunday dinners at Constance's estate were exercises in endurance. She lived in a restored antebellum home with columns and histories she'd recite to anyone who'd listen. "This home has been in the Holloway family for 4 generations," she'd say, usually while looking directly at me, the outsider. She would introduce me at country club events with calculated precision. "This is Roland's current wife, Vivian." Current. As if I were temporary, a placeholder until someone more suitable came along. Sterling never missed a chance to remind me of my place. "Must be nice," he'd say over bourbon, going from selling daisies to driving a Mercedes. The truth was I drove a Toyota Corolla and still clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. Roland and I had a system. We lived on his store manager's salary and saved everything else. The college funds grew every month. The savings account for our dream, a combination garden center and teaching space where kids could learn to grow things, accumulated slowly but steadily. "Why don't we travel more?" friends would ask. "Why isn't Vivian wearing designer clothes?" Roland would squeeze my hand under the table at these questions. We had our reasons. We'd both grown up watching money destroy families. His parents' marriage had been a cold war of financial manipulation. My father had gambled away my college fund. We wanted something different for Penelope and Theo. We wanted them to understand value beyond price tags. The greenhouse plans were our secret project. Every Sunday night after the kids were asleep, we'd spread architectural drawings across the dining room table. "This section for tropical plants," Roland would say, pencil in hand. "And here, a classroom where you can teach kids about photosynthesis." I'd add, "butterfly garden in the center, with a bench where people can sit and just breathe." It was more than a business plan. It was our love letter to the future, to the life we were building together. 6 months before Roland died, he started getting tired more easily, but we blamed it on the stress of opening 2 new stores. "You need to slow down," I told him one night as he dozed off reading to Theo. "I will," he promised, kissing my forehead, "once everything's secure for you and the kids." If I'd known how little time we had left, I would have held him longer that night. I would have memorized the way he smelled like sawdust and coffee, the way he hummed while shaving, the way he always checked on the children before bed, pulling their blankets up to their chins. I would have told him that we already had everything we needed. 3 days after the funeral, before I could even process my grief, Constance arrived with Sterling and a lawyer. It was 9 a.m. and I hadn't slept in 72 hours. Penelope had finally gone to school because her teacher said routine might help, but Theo was home with me, building block towers and knocking them down, over and over, like he was trying to make sense of destruction. "We need to discuss Roland's life insurance," Constance said, sitting in my living room like she owned it. She placed her purse on my coffee table with deliberate precision, right over the ring stains Roland's coffee cups had left. "What about it?" I asked, holding Theo while he played with my hair. $30 million is a lot of money for someone who married into this family just 4 years ago, Sterling said, loosening his tie like we were about to get into something ugly. "We think it's best if Mother manages it for the children." The lawyer, a man named Harrison Blackwood, opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Holloway, we're prepared to offer you a generous settlement, $1 million to relocate and start fresh, while Mrs. Constance Holloway assumes guardianship of the children and their inheritance. Get out of my house." My voice was calmer than I felt. "Now, Vivian," Constance said, her tone shifting to something almost sympathetic, "we know you're emotional, but think about what's best for Penelope and Theodore, private schools, trust funds, opportunities you could never provide." That's when they revealed their real plan. Harrison pulled out a manila folder, thick with photographs. "These were taken 2 weeks before your husband's death," he said, sliding them across my coffee table. The pictures showed me having coffee with Daniel, my childhood friend who'd been in town for his mother's surgery. One caught me laughing. Another showed him touching my hand across the table, though what the photo didn't show was him handing me a tissue because I'd been crying about Roland's exhaustion. "Looks intimate," Constance said. "A jury might think you were planning your next life before your husband conveniently died." "Daniel's gay," I said flatly. "He's been with his partner Marcus for 12 years. The photos don't show that," Sterling smirked. "They show a woman getting cozy with another man while her husband worked himself to death." The lawsuit was filed that afternoon. The allegations were surgical in their cruelty. I had married Roland for his money, conducted an affair, and shown negligence that contributed to his death by not insisting he see a cardiologist for symptoms I should have recognized. They wanted the insurance money and custody of my children. "These kids deserve to be raised as Holloways," Constance said, standing to leave, "not by some gold digger who'll spend their inheritance on her next husband." The legal battle that followed was designed to break me. They hired Savannah's most expensive law firm while I scrambled to find anyone willing to take my case against the Holloway family. Constance's investigators followed me everywhere. They photographed me buying wine at the grocery store, then claimed I had a drinking problem. They recorded me crying at Roland's grave and called me emotionally unstable. They interviewed every employee at my flower shop until they found one disgruntled former part-timer who said I seemed distracted in the weeks before Roland died. The court proceedings were a masterclass in character assassination. Constance brought in her country club friends who testified I seemed disconnected from Roland at social events. "She never quite fit in," Mrs. Wellington said on the stand. "Always seemed like she was playing a role." Sterling testified that Roland had confided concerns about our marriage. He told me Vivian was distant, always focused on her little flower shop instead of family responsibilities. Complete lies, but I couldn't prove Roland hadn't said those words in some private moment between brothers. They even brought in a medical expert who suggested that a caring wife would have noticed symptoms of cardiac distress. Fatigue, occasional shortness of breath, these are warning signs any attentive spouse should recognize, he said. Though Roland had never shown those symptoms beyond normal exhaustion from work, my lawyer, a public defender turned family attorney named Ruth, did her best with what we had. Character witnesses from my shop, parents from Penelope's school who knew us as a loving family, the pastor who'd married us. But against the Holloway money and reputation, it felt like bringing flowers to a gunfight. The judge's ruling came down 6 months after Roland's death. While there is no evidence of criminal wrongdoing, he said, the court finds concerns about Mrs. Holloway's fitness as a custodial parent, given her current emotional state and financial instability. I'd lost the flower shop paying legal fees. My savings were gone. The judge ruled I could keep $50,000 of the life insurance for transitional expenses. The rest went into a trust controlled by Constance. Then came the custody decision. The minor children will benefit from the stability and resources the paternal grandmother can provide, the judge declared. Penelope screamed as the social worker took her hand. "Mommy, please, I don't want to go. I'll be good, I promise." Theo didn't understand, kept asking when he could come home, when Mommy would pick him up. Constance stood there, victorious, and whispered as she passed, "They'll thank us one day." I moved to a studio apartment in Atlanta 2 weeks after losing my children. It was above a dry cleaners, and the chemical smell never left my clothes, but it was all I could afford with what remained of the $50,000. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's TV through them, always tuned to game shows that reminded me of the life I'd lost, where winning and losing mattered. No one would hire a woman who'd been painted as a black widow in the newspapers. The Savannah Morning News had run my photo with the headline, "Holloway Widow Loses Custody Battle Amid Gold Digger Claims." That article followed me to every job interview. I'd see the recognition dawn in interviewers' eyes, watch them shuffle papers and promise to be in touch with a call that never came. So I took night shifts at a warehouse, loading boxes from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Then I'd shower at the YMCA and work breakfast shifts at a diner called Sal's from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Every penny beyond basic survival went toward the 2 hours of supervised visitation I got monthly. The supervisor cost $75 per hour, plus gas to Savannah, plus activities the kids wanted to do. Those visits were supposed to maintain our bond, but they became torture. The first visit, Penelope ran to me, nearly knocked me over with her hug. But by the third month, she was different, quieter. She'd learned to look over her shoulder before hugging me, checking if the supervisor was writing something down. "Grandmother says I shouldn't talk about home with you," she told me during our fourth visit. "She says it upsets you." Theo forgot my birthday. When I reminded him gently, he shrugged and said, "Grandmother Constance says we celebrate too many meaningless holidays." The visits happened at a neutral location, a community center with painted concrete walls and fluorescent lights that hummed. We'd play board games while a stranger took notes on our interactions. "Mom seems engaged," she'd write. "Children appear comfortable but reserved." After 2 years, when Penelope said, "Grandmother says you never really loved Daddy, that you just wanted his money," I made the hardest decision of my life. I stopped visiting. Ruth, my lawyer, begged me to reconsider. "You're giving them ammunition," she warned. "They'll say you abandoned them." "They're already gone," I told her. "Constance is poisoning them against me drop by drop. If I stay away, maybe they'll wonder why. Maybe they'll question her story when they're older." Instead, I focused on rebuilding. The diner manager, Sal himself, had taken a liking to me. He was a 70-year-old Greek man who'd lost his own, kids in a custody battle 40 years earlier. "You don't give up," he told me. "You get strong. You get ready for when they come back." He let me use his computer after shifts to take online classes. I studied landscape design, learned CAD software, took business courses. It took 3 years of 16-hour days, but I got my certification. My first job was designing a meditation garden for a women's shelter. They could only pay $500, but the director knew someone who knew someone, and referrals started coming. Within 5 years, I had my own firm, Vivian's Gardens. I hired my first employee, then a second, then a third. We specialized in therapeutic gardens for hospitals, recovery centers, places where people needed beauty to heal. By year 8, I was designing botanical installations for hotels across the Southeast. The Marriott in Charleston, the Hilton in Jacksonville, spaces where thousands of people would walk through something I'd created. I never remarried, never dated. Men asked, of course. A landscape architect named Tom pursued me gently for a year, bringing coffee to my office, offering to review contracts. "You deserve to be happy," he said. But happiness felt like betrayal. Every success, every dollar earned, every garden that bloomed was for one purpose: to be ready when Penelope turned 18, when Theo turned 18, when they could choose for themselves. I sent letters they never received, birthday cards that were returned with address unknown, though I knew exactly where they lived. I kept everything in a storage unit, proof that I never stopped loving them. And I kept Roland's letter from that bottom drawer, the one I'd finally read on the first anniversary of his death. The letter was simple, but devastating. "Vivi, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. The insurance money is a test. Mom and Sterling will come for it. They always believed money was everything. But the real inheritance is in the greenhouse plans. Our children will understand when they're ready. The account in Switzerland has what they really need, not money, but truth. The password is where we first said, I love you. All my love, Roland. The Swiss account contained no money but something more valuable. Documents, recordings, evidence Roland had gathered over years. He'd known his family's nature and prepared for the possibility that they might come after us. But his letter asked me not to use it unless the children were in danger. Let them think they've won, he wrote. Our children need to see who people really are when they think they have power. So I waited. I built. I grew strong. And I prepared for the day my children would need me again. Last month, my phone rang at 2 a.m., unknown number with a Savannah area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up on the fourth ring. Is this Vivian? The voice was older but unmistakable. Penelope, my daughter, now 18 years old. Mom, it's me. I need help. Theo's in the hospital. I was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with one hand while holding the phone with the other. What happened? Which hospital? Memorial Health. He overdosed at a party. Mom, please come. I don't know what to do. I drove 6 hours without stopping, pushing my Mercedes SUV, the one success had finally afforded me, to 90 on I-16. When I arrived at Memorial Health, I found my children in a waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Penelope looked nothing like the 8-year-old who'd been taken from me. She was beautiful but exhausted, her clothes expensive but wrinkled like she'd been wearing them for days. Theo was unconscious in the ICU, 16 years old and 40 pounds underweight. Where's Constance? I asked. Penelope laughed bitterly. At home. She said this was our fault for being ungrateful. Sterling told her not to come, that it would look bad for her reputation if people knew. How long has this been going on? The drugs? 2 years. Maybe longer. He started with grandmother's pills from her medicine cabinet. Xanax, OxyContin from her hip surgery. She never noticed or didn't care. Penelope started crying. I tried to tell her, but she said Holloways don't have drug problems, that I was being dramatic. The doctor appeared with a clipboard and grim expression. He's stable, but he needs immediate rehabilitation. I recommend Willowbrook. It's the best facility in Georgia, but it requires a $50,000 deposit up front. Grandmother says we can't afford it, Penelope said quietly. She says the money's all tied up in investments. I pulled out my phone and transferred the money immediately. He starts as soon as he's medically cleared. The doctor nodded and left. Penelope stared at me. How did you have that money? I've been working, sweetheart. Every day for 10 years, waiting for when you'd need me. Word traveled fast. Constance called within hours, screaming through the phone. How dare you interfere? Where did you get that money? You probably stole it. From working, Constance, something your family never understood. She arrived at my office the next day. I now owned a building in Atlanta's Buckhead district, with Holloway Gardens etched in glass on the door. Yes, I'd kept Roland's name. It was my name, too, no matter what they'd tried to take from me. Constance stood in my reception area, looking older, smaller, her perfect composure cracked. Sterling was with her, his expensive suit not quite hiding his soft middle and desperate eyes. We need to talk about the children's future, she said, her voice lacking its usual venom. Perhaps we were hasty before. Families should stick together. I led them to my office, walls covered with awards and photographs of gardens I'd designed. Penelope had come with me, refusing to leave my side since the hospital. She sat next to me as I pulled out Roland's letter. Your son knew exactly what you were, I said, laying out the documents I'd retrieved from Switzerland years ago. Not money, as I'd let them assume all these years. Instead, there were recordings of Sterling begging Roland for money, admitting he'd been skimming from the hardware stores, bank statements showing Constance's tax fraud, moving money offshore to avoid paying millions, photos of Sterling meeting with criminals he owed money to, criminals Roland had paid off to protect his brother. Roland kept all of this to protect you, I continued. He loved you despite knowing what you were. But he also knew you'd come after his family if something happened to him. Then I pulled out the adoption papers, the document that changed everything. There's something else. Penelope and Theo aren't your biological grandchildren. Constance's face went white. What are you talking about? My sister Grace died in a car accident when Penelope was 3 and Theo was 1. She was a single mother, no father listed on the birth certificates. Roland and I adopted them, gave them our name, our love, everything. Roland never told you because he knew you'd treat them differently. He wrote it right here. Mom would never accept them if she knew they didn't carry Holloway blood. You lied to us, Sterling whispered. No, we protected 2 innocent children from your prejudice, and you proved Roland right. You only wanted them when you thought they were worth $30 million. Penelope spoke for the first time. Is that true? You only wanted us for the money? Constance couldn't answer. Her silence said everything. The insurance money you fought so hard for? I stood up. It's almost gone. Penelope told me about Sterling's investments, the failed casino, the bogus real estate development. You blew through $30 million in 10 years, and now you come begging to the woman you destroyed. We'll sue you for fraud, Sterling threatened weakly. Go ahead. I'll release everything to the authorities. The tax fraud alone will get you 20 years, Sterling. They left without another word. 2 broken people who'd spent their lives valuing money over love and finally learned the price of that choice. Penelope and Theo moved in with me last month. My apartment in Buckhead has 3 bedrooms now, 1 for each of them, decorated exactly how they want. Theo chose dark blues and grays, covering his walls with band posters and astronomy charts. Penelope picked sage green with white trim, filling her space with plants from my greenhouse. We're in family therapy twice a week, working through 10 years of lies and manipulation. The therapist, Dr. Chen, says trauma like ours doesn't heal overnight, but every session brings small victories. Theo's been clean for 60 days now. He goes to NA meetings every morning at 7 a.m., and I drive him without fail. He told me yesterday that Constance used to give him Xanax when he was 12 because he was too energetic at her dinner parties. She said, Holloways must always appear composed, he explained, his hands shaking with anger, not withdrawal. She turned me into an addict before I even knew what drugs were. Penelope's applying to colleges, all of them offering strong social work programs. I want to help kids caught in custody battles, she told me while we filled out her applications, kids who get used as weapons between adults who forgot how to love. She's written her college essay about the day she realized the grandmother who raised her had never actually loved her, just the idea of what she represented. It's painful and beautiful and will probably get her into any school she wants. Last week, Penelope found me crying over photo albums at 1 a.m., old pictures from before everything fell apart. Roland pushing Theo on a swing, Penelope in her flower girl dress at our wedding, the 4 of us covered in flour from a failed attempt at making Christmas cookies. Mom, why didn't you use those documents during the custody battle? She asked, sitting beside me on the couch. Because Roland's letter asked me not to unless you kids were in danger. He wrote, let them think they've won. Our children need to see who people really are when they think they have power. That's the only way they'll learn to value love over money. Theo joined us then, couldn't sleep again, which happens often in early recovery. He curled up against me like he used to when he was 6, before they took him away. You lost everything for us. No, baby. I lost everything to learn what really mattered. And when you needed me, I had rebuilt something real. Not just money, but strength, wisdom, the ability to stand up to anyone who tried to hurt you again. Constance tried to fight for visitation rights last week, claiming grandparental privileges. The judge reviewed the Switzerland documents, the evidence of child endangerment through prescription drugs, the financial malfeasance. Not only did he deny her request, but he opened an investigation into the original custody case. Ruth, my old lawyer, called me crying. We might be able to prove judicial misconduct, she said. Constance's lawyer had connections to that judge. They played golf together every Sunday. Sterling fled to Costa Rica 3 days after our confrontation, taking what little remained of the inheritance. Constance lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in the suburbs now, surviving on Social Security. Penelope visited her once, trying to find closure. She came back quiet and sad. She's still blaming everyone but herself, Penelope said, still insisting she did everything out of love. We're opening that gardening center next spring, the one Roland and I dreamed about all those years ago. Holloway Gardens, but not for the family that tried to destroy us. For the man who loved us enough to protect us even after death. For the children who survived manipulation and found their way back to truth. The greenhouse plans were exactly where Roland said they'd be. But they contained more than architectural drawings. Each page had handwritten notes in the margins. For Penelope, remember that beautiful things grow in difficult soil. For Theo, the strongest roots grow in the dark before reaching light. For my Vivi, some flowers bloom after the hardest winters. The grand opening is set for April 15th, exactly 15 years after I first met Roland. We're building a meditation garden in the center, with a bench bearing a simple plaque. In memory of Roland Holloway, who knew that love grows better than money. Theo designed the children's section where kids from the recovery center can learn to grow vegetables. Penelope's creating an internship program for teenagers aging out of foster care, teaching them landscaping skills they can use to build careers. I'm teaching classes on therapeutic gardening for people rebuilding their lives, the way gardens helped me rebuild mine. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't what someone leaves you, it's what they teach you about surviving without it. Roland knew his family would show their true selves when money was involved. He knew I'd grow stronger in the fight. Most importantly, he knew our children would eventually see the difference between hollow wealth and real love. We're all blooming now, finally, in our own season. Not because of the money we have or don't have, but because we chose each other when it mattered most. That's the real inheritance Roland left us. The knowledge that love isn't about blood or money or names on legal documents. It's about showing up at 2 a.m. when someone needs you, rebuilding your life for a possibility, and never giving up on the people who matter, even when they're taken from you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that rebuilding is possible. Leave a comment below about your own experience with family, inheritance, or starting over. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption.